Alrighty, welcome to your animation tip of the week. I'm Ryan and we're going to be talking about deformers, a very cool little part of Maya that lets us do all sorts of stuff, not just animation but modeling too. So what I'm going to do today, I'm just going to take you very quickly through the different kinds of deformers, what you need to get them to work and get them happening on your objects, and a few potential uses for them to get those up and running. So let's jump straight in. So deformers are always found in your deform menu. So up the top here, just over here, deform, you're going to find that nonlinear bend, flare, sine, squash, twist, and wave. Now, some of these you may use more than others, but I'm going to run through them in general. Now, the first thing to be aware of is that bend deformers don't work very well when we only have simple geometry. We're going to need to add a few edge loops to this. So let me just make a new cube for myself. Let's add some more subdivisions. There we go, that'll be plenty. And we can now go ahead and deform this cube. So, cool, that should do nicely. So let's go ahead, let's go back to our deformers and let's put our first deformer on here, which is the bend deformer. Now, you won't necessarily see the deformer straight away. If I move it to the side, you'll see there's a little line here. And if I see through my object, you can see it's still there. It's also an object in your outliner, so you can always select it if you lose it. So it's going to be really handy in there. So I'm going to go back to having that be solid. The key controls you need to know are over in your channel box. So under your inputs in your bend, you'll be able to see that here. So we've got envelope, curvature, which is our main one, and we see as we increase the curvature, we can actually twist and bend this. So notice that we're not moving any of the verts here. As we move it, we'll see the deformer does all sorts of interesting different things. So it's all dependent on the position of these things. We can obviously rotate this around and it will bend in a circle, almost as like it's rolling around a hula hoop or something like that. And also the high and low bound control the start and end of the bend. So we can see as we increase and decrease the low bound, the angle of these change. So you've got all sorts of things to look at there. So envelope also, again, sort of an overall kind of how much it's affecting the shape. So very simple kind of controls on there, massively useful. So the best thing about deformers is that they're non-destructive. So obviously you've seen we can move them around, they can do all sorts of things. Not only can we animate this, so if we just set some keys on here, and maybe over here as well, we'll just move it around. We can see as we play on our timeline, it will animate as it plays. So we can see those happening there. So it can be an animation tool, but also can be a modeling tool. So I'll show you that later, but good to know that it's useful. If you don't like it, you can always just delete it and our cube will return to normal. However, if you'd like to keep a deformation, say you're like, yes, this is great. You like what's happening there, you want to keep it like that forever. You can go ahead and you can delete the history and the deformer will go away and you will bake in that deformation. So you can see that's going to stay there as we are now. So that's super helpful to know as well. So let's go ahead and delete that and we'll just very quickly run through the other ones. So again, make sure when you're using these deformers, you are selecting your object first that you want to apply a deformer to. Go to your nonlinear and let's say we've got these things, so we can decide how much we want to put these around. We can apply different kind of values to these. We can flat on this one, we can flare it in different ways. So there's all sorts of interesting kind of shapes you can make with deformers that you might spend more time modeling traditionally than you can just smash these out with a deformer very quickly. So again, as I say, non-destructive, so it can be used for all sorts of interesting kind of applications. So the more you play around with them and the more you use them, the more useful they will become. So flare, very straightforward. It flares out based on these handles. Let's go to our next one. Got a sine wave. So as I just increase the amplitude here, we'll see we get almost like a little wiggle through here. And as we change the offset, we'll see it wiggles back and forth. So very, very interesting for all sorts of stuff. And again, you can change the amount of drop off. You can change the wavelength as well, so you can sort of make that much slower and wigglier, or you could really make that quite spiky. and so on and so forth. So you can see that we're still limited by our geometry here. If I press smooth on this, the cool thing is that these do still work. So even in smooth mode, they will work. So all sorts of quite interesting kind of things to do in here. And of course, whoops, let's actually grab the handle there. You can see they will also work as intended. So all sorts of interesting stuff to try and do. Interesting ways of, I guess, manipulating shapes that you might not otherwise get to. So that's quite a cool one. You can see it has scrambled the geometry there, but it's all fine. So we can go ahead again, delete this, and it's back to normal. So very handy stuff there. Let's go into our squash. Quite similar to the flare, really. It just sort of squashes and stretches based on that, but it also moves the handles apart. So if you've ever built any rigs, you may use these, but again, handy for all sorts of stuff. So factor. Unfortunately, they're not all named the same, but you're always looking for something that will increase the amount that it will deform, or something that will control the value of that. So whoops, need to make sure I select that. Let's twist this. So again, we can change the start angle, we can twist these up. So if you've made screws or bolts or anything like that, again, this is a great way to utilize the deformer to maybe help you out with that. So very useful stuff. And I think we're nearly getting into this, the wave. So we can see it's as if there's sort of a water drop, or sort of like a ripple sort of occurring. So again, depending on what you're trying to achieve, you'll apply different settings, but again, you can see very interesting kind of results. And if we just set a key on this and we let this animate here, you'll see we get this sort of quite cool effect that sort of plays on its own. So that's very neat. And obviously, much just like before, those effects are movable. So if we say it's here at the start, and then here at the end, go back to the start, we can see it animate through our object. So that's the base deformers there. And what I want to show you very quickly is how those can be used in a modeling sense. So one of the things you could look at is, say you want to put a bend in a pipe, right? So one of the things you would do is you could select all these faces if you're just going about your day and modeling these, picking them up, moving them over, and giving them a rotate. This is a slow but steady way to model a bend. It gives you a lot of control on how that bend will be achieved, but isn't necessarily the speediest of approaches. So we're always looking for neat ways to sort of gain control and save a bit of time. So that's one way to do it. The other might be to, I'll just unhide something I've had earlier. Say we take an existing cylinder. I've added some subdivisions here just because, like I talked about before, we know that we need to add some subdivisions for the deformer to work correctly, and we can put a bend deformer on this. So let's just give that a little bit of bend, see where that's bending. I know that I need to rotate it minus 90 degrees, and I'm just going to take off the low bound on this. We're going to move this deformer down just to be at the same sort of spot as this, and I'm just going to increase the curvature until we can see it's at a similar kind of spot. So I'd still need to extrude this out. But you can see it's achieved the same sort of angle of bend. It's much quicker, and it's a bit cleaner as well. So you could definitely add more in here, but you can see this is just as good for doing all sorts of things. You get nice clean bends, no matter what, because it's based on the deformer. So like I said before, this is editable. So if you didn't like the angle, you could change this and sort of go through and pick an angle that you like best. So you can potentially make several different kinds of curves and put them together. So that's a really helpful kind of thing. The last thing I want to show you is how this can be used to build, I guess, cylindrical objects or sort of wheels in this case. So if we just take this flat plane, for example, And I'll try and do a very simple version of this. And say we're going to make a tire. And so what I'm going to do, I'm just going to select a series of verts to go ahead and just make a little pattern for. So, you know, your specific tire pattern may be a little different. You'll probably have different needs to what I'm doing for this quick little demo. But again, this is just to sort of demonstrate the idea. So if we just pop these up, we give them a bit of thickness, change the offset on them a little bit, and give them a little bevel on top there just to put them like so. I'm also going to use a little bend deformer here. Cool, I'm going to lay this flat. Again, that's going to be at 90. And we're going to change the curvature a little bit. So I'm just going to bend this over a little bit. Cool, so now that I'm happy with that, I'm going to delete my history. That's going to keep that as is. And I'm going to duplicate this across. So I'm going to hit Control D. And I'm going to move it over 1 unit on my translate. Actually, not quite. I'm going to move it over and see if I can get them about as close as I can there. You can use snapping if you prefer, but it's not always, it can play up sometimes. So we're pretty happy with these at the moment. That'll be okay. So if we hold Shift D, move that across, again, get it really, really close. I didn't quite get it right last time, so Shift D, and it will continue to duplicate that around. So we'll just do a few of these, make a bit of a skinny tire, and I'm going to grab all of these, combine them. I'm going to delete my history first, combine them, and we can see all of these things in our outline. Make sure to always be centering your pivot, deleting your history, and zeroing your transforms. That keeps us with a very nice, clean outliner there. So that's really handy. Now we can just do what we did before. We're going to grab a deformer, nonlinear, and bend. And we can see we're going to increase the curvature just to see where it's headed. So I know that I need to go minus 90, and this can be 90 as well. And we're just going to increase the curvature all the way till it meets that point. So that's cool. I'm happy with that level of bend. We can go ahead and delete that deformer. I'm just going to grab all the verts and give them a merge just to make sure. So that looks like that's working now. Very good, and we can go ahead and call that a day. So obviously you can have more complicated tread patterns, you can have all those stuff connected, but the general idea is to build things flat and then bend them around to what you need them to be. That's a really good way to get some of that stuff done. So an example of like a more finished version of that would be one that I just made earlier. So you can see that you've got like a little off-road tire. Like I said, you can have more interesting sort of stud patterns and these kind of things. Obviously, very, very basic still, but this was made using the same technique where I built this flat, I curved it around, and then you know, using that deformer, and then I put that together. Same with this actually. Again, that's bent and curved around. So this is all still built flat. So I really recommend if you're using any sort of radial object, anything that's got a bend in it, yeah, always think if there's a slightly smarter way to do it. And there's all sorts of stuff you can do with deformers. So get in there, have a play. They're super fun, and I really recommend trying to use them for all sorts of stuff. So get after it, and good luck.